Maddison Fox had seen every kind of mansion. French castles in Connecticut, glass palaces overlooking Malibu, historic estates where every chandelier cost more than her first apartment. As one of New York's most sought-after luxury event planners, she had spent years turning expensive houses into unforgettable experiences. But when her taxi stopped in front of Storm Manor, she frowned. Not because it wasn't beautiful. It was breathtaking. Stone walls climbed toward the morning sky. White columns framed an entrance wide enough for 2 limousines. Gardens stretched farther than she could see. A crystal fountain sparkled in the center of a circular driveway. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. It looked less like someone's home, and more like a luxury hotel waiting for guests who never arrived. She paid the driver, adjusted the leather portfolio tucked beneath her arm, and walked toward the entrance. Before she reached the enormous oak doors, they opened. An older gentleman with silver hair smiled warmly. "You must be Miss Fox." "I am. I'm Walter, Mr. Storm's butler." His handshake was gentle. His smile was genuine. Unlike the mansion, the house somehow felt quiet, not peaceful, but lonely. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Before we continue today's story, if you love billionaire romance stories with powerful emotions, unforgettable characters, and endings that leave you smiling, then make sure to subscribe, like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because today's story isn't just any story. It's about a woman who was hired to decorate a billionaire's mansion for one special event, only to discover that the one thing the mansion had been missing all along was her. Now, sit back, relax as we delve back into the story. Walter led her through hallways lined with priceless paintings. Every vase stood perfectly centered. Every rug looked untouched. Not a single family photograph sat on the tables. Not even a crooked picture frame. It was as though someone had decorated the mansion for a magazine photoshoot years ago, and forgotten to live inside it afterward. Walter noticed her looking around. "You'll meet Mr. Storm in the breakfast room." She nodded. "I hope he's friendly." Walter chuckled. "I hope so too." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means Mr. Storm's mood usually depends on whether he's had coffee." Maddison laughed. "I already like you, Walter. The feeling is mutual." He opened a pair of tall doors. There he is. Joshua Storm stood beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. 6'3", broad shoulders, blonde hair slightly messy as though he had run his fingers through it one too many times. His navy shirt was rolled neatly at the sleeves. One hand held a coffee mug. The other scrolled through emails on a tablet. Without looking up, he spoke. "You're late." Maddison glanced at her watch. "I arrived 4 minutes early." Joshua finally lifted his eyes. He checked the antique grandfather clock beside him. The clock had stopped. At 7:08. He looked back at her. "Oh." She folded her arms. "So, should I apologize to the broken clock?" For one silent second, Walter held his breath. Then something unexpected happened. Joshua laughed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough for the corners of his mouth to surrender. Walter blinked in disbelief. He hadn't heard that sound in weeks. Joshua set down the tablet. "Maddison Fox." "Joshua Storm. I've heard you're impossible. I've heard you're rich." Another pause. Then Joshua smiled wider. "I think we're going to get along." 10 minutes later, they sat across from one another at a breakfast table long enough to seat 24 people. Only 2 plates rested upon it. Maddison looked from one end of the table to the other. "Do you usually eat this far away from your own coffee?" Joshua followed her gaze. "I suppose I do. You know, tables this size were invented for families. I bought it because it matched the room." "I can tell." He raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" She leaned back. "It means this house has excellent taste." He waited. "But," he asked, "but it has absolutely no personality." Walter accidentally coughed into his sleeve. Joshua looked amused. "Go on." Maddison stood. She walked toward the windows, then toward the fireplace, then around the room. Finally, she turned dramatically. "This isn't a mansion." Joshua frowned. "It isn't?" he asked. Maddison looked at him. It's an expensive waiting room. Walter looked down immediately to hide his grin. Joshua crossed his arms. Explain. It doesn't smell like breakfast. It doesn't sound like laughter. There isn't one blanket draped over a chair. No books left open. No flowers. No evidence that anyone actually enjoys living here. She looked around once more. I've seen museums that feel warmer. Walter quietly prepared himself for the possibility that security would soon escort her outside. Instead, Joshua nodded thoughtfully. I've never considered any of that. I know. How? Because if you had, this room would have offended you years ago. He laughed again. His second laugh in less than 15 minutes. Walter decided he officially adored Miss Fox. The meeting continued. Joshua explained why she'd been hired. His grandmother, Eleanor Storm, would celebrate her 80th birthday in 3 weeks. Every child, every grandchild, every cousin, every lifelong friend. They were all flying in. It'll be the first time the entire family has gathered in almost 6 years. Maddison smiled. Then this isn't just an event. No, it's a reunion. Joshua nodded. My grandmother deserves something unforgettable. She closed her portfolio. I'll make sure she gets it. But, he tilted his head. But what? I'm not just decorating the ballroom. You aren't. No. She pointed toward the hallway. I'm decorating your home. Joshua blinked. My home? If people are celebrating family. She smiled softly. They should feel it the moment they walk through the front door. The renovations began the following morning. Within hours, the mansion looked like controlled chaos. Florists filled the entrance with fresh white roses and lavender. Carpenters carried wooden shelves inside. Boxes of candles lined the hallways. Music floated through open windows. Employees laughed while moving furniture. For the first time, Storm Manor sounded alive. Joshua walked downstairs carrying another cup of coffee. He froze. What happened to my foyer? Maddison turned around holding 3 paint samples. It evolved. My marble table is gone. It was intimidating. Had to change it. My bronze sculpture, he asked. It now has friends. He looked toward the entrance. Large olive trees stood beside the staircase. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. Soft lighting replaced the harsh white bulbs. Even the air smelled different. What is that scent? Cinnamon. It's June. So, cinnamon is for Christmas. She smiled. Cinnamon is for people who want a house to feel like home. Joshua stared another moment. I don't hate it, he admitted. Highest compliment he's ever given, Walter whispered as he walked past. Over the next week, Joshua discovered that Maddison possessed a remarkable talent. She never ordered people around. She inspired them. When one exhausted florist struggled to lift heavy boxes, she helped. When the kitchen staff worked through lunch, she ordered pizza for everyone. When a young decorator accidentally broke an expensive vase, he apologized with tears in his eyes. Maddison simply handed him a broom. It's just glass. But it belonged to Mr. Storm. So, she said with a smirk. Joshua, who had witnessed the entire exchange from the staircase, walked over. The young man braced himself. Joshua looked at Maddison. What would you have done if it were your vase? I would have swept it up. Joshua nodded. Then sweep it up. The employee looked between them. That's it. Joshua shrugged. It was just glass. The young man nearly cried from relief. After he left, Joshua looked at Maddison. You've ruined my reputation. I've improved it. By Friday, she noticed another strange habit. Every morning, Joshua skipped breakfast. Every afternoon, he skipped lunch. Every evening, he claimed he wasn't hungry. Finally, she marched into his office carrying a plate. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. He didn't look up from his laptop. I'm busy. I can see. I'll eat later. You said that yesterday. And, he said. And you also said it the day before. Joshua sighed. Maddison. No billionaire decisions until 3 bites. He stared. You can't be serious. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat. I cleared my schedule. You did. I have all afternoon. You don't. I do now. They locked eyes. 30 seconds passed. 1 minute. Finally, Joshua picked up the fork. Tyrant. She smiled victoriously. I prefer nutrition consultant. He took one bite. Then another. Then another. Without realizing it, he finished the entire plate. She folded her arms proudly. There. There what? Proof. Proof of what? You're dramatically easier to like when you've eaten. Joshua laughed so suddenly that he almost dropped his fork. Outside the office, Walter quietly smiled to himself. The mansion hadn't heard this much laughter in years. And somehow, it all seemed to arrive with one woman carrying flowers in one hand and stubbornness in the other. By the second week, Storm Manor no longer woke up in silence. Someone was always humming. Fresh coffee drifted through the hallways. The gardeners laughed with the decorators. The chefs argued over desserts as though they were competing in a television show. Even the birds seemed louder. Walter stood beside one of the windows one morning, watching the organized chaos outside. The head chef walked over carrying a tray of pastries. What are you looking at? Walter smiled. The difference one person can make. The chef looked outside. Maddison was teaching 2 gardeners how to tie ribbon around flower baskets. One of them accidentally tied himself to a wheelbarrow. She laughed so hard that she had to grab the fence for support. Within seconds, the 2 gardeners were laughing too. Walter shook his head. I've worked here for 23 years. And I've never seen the staff smile this much. Joshua noticed it too. Not because someone told him. Because every morning when he walked downstairs, someone was already smiling before they greeted him. He wasn't used to that. He had built billion-dollar companies, negotiated impossible deals, led thousands of employees. Yet somehow, one event planner had improved morale inside his own house in less than 2 weeks. It irritated him, mostly because he admired it. That afternoon, Maddison stood on a ladder hanging delicate crystal lights above the grand staircase. Joshua walked underneath without noticing. She looked down. Stop. He froze. What? One more step. He obediently took another. She smiled. Perfect. What was that for? She leaned over slightly. I needed to know if you're tall enough. For what? She gently hung a strand of lights across his shoulders. There. He looked down. What exactly am I? A very expensive coat rack. 2 housekeepers burst into laughter. Joshua looked completely offended. I own 4 companies. And today, she climbed down the ladder. You're holding fairy lights. He glanced at the staff. You all find this amusing? Nobody answered. Mostly because they were trying not to laugh. Joshua sighed dramatically. I've lost control of my own mansion. Maddison took the lights from his shoulders. No. She smiled. You've finally relaxed inside it. For reasons he couldn't explain. Those words stayed with him long after she walked away. 3 days before Eleanor Storm's birthday, the family started arriving. The first car pulled into the driveway just after lunch. A cheerful woman stepped out before the driver could open her door. Evelyn, Joshua called. His older sister threw her arms around him. My serious little brother. I'm 33. You'll always be my serious little brother. She stepped back. You've been eating. Joshua blinked. What? You've got color in your face. Before he could answer, Evelyn spotted Maddison arranging flowers near the entrance. Oh, Evelyn smiled knowingly. Joshua immediately recognized that smile. No. What do you mean no? I know that look. I haven't said anything. You don't have to. Evelyn walked straight toward Maddison. You must be the reason my brother finally looks alive. Joshua closed his eyes. It has begun. Maddison Fox. Evelyn hugged her before Maddison even had time to introduce herself. I'm Joshua's sister. It's lovely to meet you. Evelyn looked around. You did all this? With an incredible team. My brother actually approved these colors? He argued about 3 cushions. They were expensive cushions. Joshua defended himself from across the room. They're cushions, Josh. They're imported. Maddison laughed. I lost. No. We compromised, Joshua corrected gently. Evelyn looked between them. then smiled to herself. Interesting, she thought. Very interesting. By evening, the mansion had filled with relatives. Children raced through the gardens. Uncles argued over chess. Aunts helped the chefs decorate desserts. Someone started playing the piano. For the first time, Storm Manor sounded exactly the way Maddison had imagined it should. She stood quietly near one of the windows, taking it all in. Joshua walked beside her. You were right. She looked at him. About? This house. I usually am, she said, feigning pride. He chuckled. It needed people. It needed love. It needed noise. She looked toward the children chasing each other through the hallway. Listen. He did. Laughter echoed through every room. She smiled. That's what expensive houses can't buy. Joshua didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her. Not the decorations. Not the flowers. Her. You really love making people happy. She shrugged. My parents did. He turned toward her. They were event planners too? She smiled softly. No. My dad fixed watches. My mom taught music. What does that have to do with parties? They celebrated ordinary days. Joshua frowned curiously. My dad would repair someone's watch. And Mom would bake a cake because he finished another week of work. She laughed quietly. We celebrated report cards. The first rain. A good cup of coffee. My brother losing his first tooth. Joshua listened without interrupting. When I became an event planner, I realized people spend thousands celebrating weddings, but forget to celebrate Tuesday. He couldn't help smiling. You celebrate Tuesdays? I absolutely celebrate Tuesdays. Why? Because they become Wednesdays eventually. Joshua laughed. I have no idea what that means. It means life moves fast. So celebrate while it's here. He looked around the mansion, then back at her. I've been doing a terrible job of that. The next morning, Eleanor's Storm finally arrived. Every member of the family gathered outside. The chauffeur opened the car door. An elegant woman with chubby build and silver hair stepped out wearing an elegant dress and carrying a walking cane she barely used. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. There he is. Joshua hugged her carefully. Happy birthday, Grandma. She touched his cheek. You look happier. So everyone keeps saying. I have eyes. She smiled. I know. Just then, she noticed Maddison. Oh. Joshua silently sighed. Here we go. Maddison walked over politely. Mrs. Storm, I'm Maddison, the event planner. Yes. Eleanor studied her for a long moment. Then she looked at Joshua. So. Joshua immediately pointed a finger. Don't. I haven't spoken. I know exactly what you're thinking. Eleanor ignored him completely. She took both of Maddison's hands. My dear, I've been trying to convince this stubborn grandson of mine to put flowers in this house for 10 years. Maddison smiled. He preferred gray. I can believe that. Gray is elegant, Joshua defended himself. Eleanor looked horrified. Gray is a rainy Tuesday. Maddison burst into laughter. Joshua threw both hands into the air. I've been outnumbered since breakfast. That evening, the birthday celebration began. Thousands of tiny lights illuminated the gardens. Live musicians played beneath ancient oak trees. Long wooden tables overflowed with food. Children roasted marshmallows over elegant fire pits. Every guest seemed reluctant to stay indoors. Eleanor looked around slowly. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Joshua noticed immediately. Grandma? She squeezed his hand. You brought my family home. His voice softened. You deserved it. She smiled. No. Her gaze shifted toward Maddison. She did. The evening unfolded beautifully. Then came the dancing. A string quartet transitioned into a lively jazz band. Couples filled the dance floor. Children copied the adults. Even Walter danced once before insisting he had important butler responsibilities. Maddison stood near the refreshment table smiling at the scene. Joshua walked over. You aren't dancing. I'm working. You've finished working. I still have responsibilities. He held out his hand. 5 minutes. She looked at it. I don't think billionaires ask twice. I don't. So this is my only chance? It is. She placed her hand in his. Well, I'd hate to waste the opportunity. The orchestra shifted into a slower melody. Joshua guided her gently onto the dance floor. I should warn you. She looked up. I'm not very graceful. I own expensive shoes. That doesn't answer the question. He smiled. I step on fewer feet than I used to. I suppose that's progress. They began to move. Slowly. Comfortably. Neither spoke for a while. The music seemed to say enough. Finally, Joshua broke the silence. Thank you. For what? For proving this house could feel different. She looked around. Families laughed beneath glowing lights. Children chased fireflies. Eleanor was teaching one of her great-grandsons an old dance. This wasn't me. It was. She shook her head. I only arranged tables. You rearranged something else. What could that be? She asked. Joshua looked directly into her eyes. Me. Her heart stumbled. Just a little. She smiled to hide it. I think that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me. It wasn't meant to be nice. What was it meant to be? The truth. For a heartbeat. Neither of them noticed the music. Or the guests. Or the lights. Only each other. From across the garden, Eleanor leaned toward Walter with the smile of someone who had lived long enough to recognize love before the people feeling it did. I don't think she's leaving this mansion, she whispered. Walter smiled knowingly. I've been thinking the same thing. But neither of them realized. Joshua himself had already started thinking of reasons to keep Maddison at Storm Manor long after the birthday celebration was over. And by the end of the weekend, he would come up with his first excuse. The birthday celebration became everything Joshua had hoped it would be. No one wanted to leave. Children fell asleep on their parents' shoulders after exhausting themselves with games in the gardens. The older relatives lingered around the fire pits, retelling stories they had told 100 times before, yet laughing as if they were hearing them for the first time. The musicians packed away their instruments reluctantly. Walter stood near the entrance with a satisfied smile. In all his years serving the Storm family, he had never seen the mansion glow like this. Not because of the lights. Because of the people. And in the middle of it all, Maddison Fox moved quietly from guest to guest, making sure everyone had everything they needed. She adjusted an elderly guest's shawl when the evening breeze turned cool. She knelt beside a little girl whose birthday ribbon had come undone and tied it again with practiced fingers. She thanked every server before they left for the night. No cameras followed her. No applause waited for her. She simply believed kindness belonged in every celebration. Joshua watched every moment. He couldn't remember the last time he'd admired someone this much. The following morning, Storm Manor became unusually quiet again. Suitcases rolled across marble floors. Goodbyes echoed through the hallways. Cars disappeared one after another through the front gates. By noon, the mansion had returned to its usual stillness. Except, it no longer felt lonely. Fresh flowers still brightened every room. Soft music floated from hidden speakers. The scent of cinnamon and baked bread drifted from the kitchen. Life lingered in every corner. Maddison stood in the ballroom with a clipboard, checking the final inventory before leaving. Joshua entered, hands tucked into his pockets. So, he began. So, I suppose this is goodbye. She smiled. I suppose it is. Silence settled between them. Neither seemed eager to break it. Finally, Joshua cleared his throat. I have another event. She looked up. You do? Next month. What kind of event? He hesitated for the briefest second. A garden appreciation luncheon. She blinked. A what? A luncheon. I heard that part. It's for... He searched for an answer. People who appreciate gardens. She stared at him. How many people? Joshua glanced toward the ceiling as though the answer might be written there. 4. 4. It's exclusive. Maddison folded her arms. Joshua Storm. Yes. Are you making up events? His lips twitched. No. She narrowed her eyes. You're a terrible liar. I own several companies. You've said that before. I do. And yet you can't invent a believable luncheon. He sighed dramatically. I tried. She laughed, the sound filling the room. I almost believed you. You did. No. You smiled before you finished the sentence. He rubbed the back of his neck. I don't usually do this. Do what? Ask people to stay. The room fell quiet. I know your contract is finished, he continued softly. He stopped. Words, the one thing that usually obeyed him in boardrooms and negotiations, suddenly refused. I've gotten used to seeing you here. Maddison looked down at her clipboard. So have I. She finished packing that afternoon. 1 suitcase. 2 boxes of design samples. 3 weeks of memories she hadn't expected to make. Walter helped carry everything to the front door. I'll miss you, Miss Fox. I'm going to miss you too. You know. He lowered his voice. Mr. Storm has smiled more in the last 3 weeks than in the previous 3 years. She looked toward the staircase where Joshua stood pretending to answer emails on his phone. Has he? Walter nodded. And for someone who insists he's very busy. He smiled knowingly. He spent an unusual amount of time walking past whichever room you happened to be working in. Maddison laughed. I noticed. So did the entire staff. Joshua walked outside just as the driver loaded her luggage into the car. I wanted to thank you. You already have. Not properly. He handed her a neatly wrapped package. She frowned. You didn't have to. I know. She untied the ribbon. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. The cover was embossed with gold letters. Ideas that deserve to be celebrated. She slowly opened it. The first page contained only one handwritten sentence. You taught me that ordinary days deserve extraordinary memories. Her eyes softened. She looked up. This is beautiful. I thought you might fill the rest. She smiled. I will. The driver quietly closed the trunk. The moment had arrived. Joshua extended his hand. It was an honor working with you, Maddison Fox. She looked at his hand for a second, then ignored it completely. Instead, she hugged him. Joshua stood frozen. Then slowly, he wrapped his arms around her. Neither spoke. Neither wanted to be the first to let go. When they finally stepped apart, she climbed into the car. Walter opened the gate. The engine started. Joshua watched the car disappear beyond the trees. Only after it had vanished did he whisper to himself, the house is going to be unbearably quiet. It was. The following morning, breakfast tasted ordinary. The flowers remained beautiful, but somehow less cheerful. Even Walter noticed. You've walked into the ballroom 6 times today. Joshua looked around. Have I? You also visited the garden twice. I own the garden, don't I? You were looking for someone. Joshua didn't answer. Because Walter was right. 3 days later, Joshua sat in a board meeting while executives discussed quarterly profits. And that concludes our presentation. Everyone looked toward him. Joshua blinked. I'm sorry. The executives exchanged confused glances. You've never apologized during a meeting. I wasn't listening. One director looked genuinely worried. Are you feeling all right, sir? Joshua stood. Reschedule the rest. But we still have. It can wait. He grabbed his keys. For the first time in years, business could wait. Across the city, Maddison stood inside her design studio surrounded by color palettes and fabric samples. Her assistant approached. You've rejected 4 clients today. I know. And you've spent 10 minutes staring out the window. I know. You miss him. Maddison sighed. I miss the people. Her assistant smiled. That's not what I asked. Before Maddison could answer, the studio door opened. Joshua Storm stepped inside carrying a large cardboard box. She looked surprised. What is that? He set it on her desk. It arrived at the mansion this morning. She opened the box. Inside were dozens of handmade thank you cards. Each one came from a member of the Storm family. One child had drawn stick figures holding balloons. Another simply wrote, "Thank you for making great-grandma laugh." An elderly aunt had written, I haven't seen Joshua dance since he was 16. Thank you for giving us that memory. Maddison read every card, one by one. Her eyes shimmered. They're beautiful. Joshua nodded. They're all addressed to you. She closed the box gently. You drove all the way here just to deliver thank you cards? No. I also forgot to tell you something. She smiled. What? I don't have another event. I knew it. I never planned a garden appreciation luncheon. I definitely knew that. I simply wanted another excuse to see you. Neither of them laughed this time. The words were too honest. Joshua took a slow breath. I've spent years building companies. I've bought houses, cars, artwork. I thought filling my life with achievements would make it feel complete. He looked directly into her eyes. Then you walked into my home carrying flowers and stubborn opinions. She laughed softly through gathering tears. And somehow, you made that mansion feel alive. It wasn't the flowers. It wasn't the decorations. It was you. He stepped closer. I don't want another event planner. I don't want another designer. His voice became quieter. Want more ordinary Tuesdays with you. Maddison covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. You remembered. I celebrate Tuesdays now. She smiled through tears. I noticed. I don't know where this leads. I only know that every room feels brighter when you're in it. He reached into his jacket. She instinctively looked at his hand. It wasn't a ring. It was a small brass key. He placed it gently in her palm. She looked down. A key? Joshua nodded. The greenhouse. She looked confused. I had it renovated yesterday. Why? Because you once said every beautiful house deserves a place where things can keep growing. Her eyes searched his. I'd like it to become your studio. She stared at him. You mean? I mean no contracts, he said. No deadlines. No obligations. He smiled warmly. Just a place where the woman who changed my house can keep creating beautiful things. Anne. He hesitated only a moment. Hopefully allow me to keep finding reasons to bring you coffee every morning. A tear escaped before she could stop it. She laughed at herself. I planned hundreds of events. I've never been this speechless. Joshua gently brushed away the tear with his thumb. Is that a yes? She looked at the little brass key once more. Then back at the man standing in front of her. I told you something the day we met. He smiled. You've told me many things. I said your mansion wasn't a home. You were right. She wrapped her fingers around the key. It is now. Joshua frowned playfully. Because of the flowers? She stepped closer until only inches separated them. No. She smiled with all the warmth she carried in her heart. Because the man inside finally learned how to live in it. She rose onto her toes and kissed his cheek. Soft. Gentle. Certain. Joshua laughed, a full, carefree laugh that echoed through the studio. For once, there was no board meeting waiting. No phone ringing. No billion-dollar decision demanding his attention. Only the woman who had unknowingly rewritten the meaning of home. A few months later, visitors to Storm Manor noticed something new. The mansion was still elegant. Still breathtaking. But now, fresh flowers greeted every guest. A blanket rested casually over the living room sofa. Books lay open on coffee tables. Music drifted through the hallways. Children from Joshua's extended family visited almost every weekend. Employees no longer hurried through silent corridors. They laughed. They celebrated birthdays. Movie nights became a monthly tradition. The once empty greenhouse overflowed with color, sketches, ribbons, and floral designs. Everyone called it Maddison's garden. Joshua still insisted on making coffee every morning. Maddison still reminded him to eat breakfast. And every Tuesday, no matter how busy life became, they left work early. Sometimes they walked through the gardens. Sometimes they cooked together, laughing whenever Joshua managed to burn toast. Sometimes they did nothing at all except sit on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky. Because she had been right. Ordinary days deserved extraordinary memories. And somewhere between planning one unforgettable birthday, sharing countless smiles, and celebrating ordinary Tuesdays, the event planner never really left the billionaire's mansion. She simply lived in it. If this story made you smile, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes love can turn a house into a home. And tell us in the comments, what ordinary moment in life do you think deserves celebrating? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, this is StoryVerse TV.